totally natural thing, and it's like very, very healthy. And it's beautiful. Like you're out there looking at the mountains all around and nature, like Tweety birds flying by when you're bathing. You're not sealed off in some little fiberglass cubicle.
G'day and welcome. This is the Hunting Republic podcast. The podcast where we discuss all things hunting and outdoors. So if you love hunting, camping, fishing, hiking, bushwalking, full driving, or just being in the outdoors, then we reckon you've come to the right place. My name is Luke. I will be your host, and I can't wait to have you along for the journey. So please enjoy this edition of the Hunting Republic podcast. G'day team, and welcome to the third episode of the Hunting Republic podcast. I'd like to again just kick off this episode by saying thanks. Thanks to everybody who's gotten in contact. Thanks to everybody who's made a comment, given us a like or a share, or gotten in contact via a PM. It again has been so encouraging. Your feedback has been super appreciated and really helpful. As mentioned at the start of the second episode, the learning curve is super steep. The technology curve, the content curve, and everything is a really, really interesting experience. So thanks very much for all the support, guys. We are loving hearing what you've got to say, and we're enjoying the challenge of putting out this production for you. So thanks very much to everybody. So moving on, talking about this third episode. So this morning I got to have a chat with a local fellow, Jay, and I bumped into Jay on social media there a few months back, and he's a fellow hunter and fisher and outdoor enthusiast from the Bundy area, and it was really good to meet somebody new. I haven't met Jay before, and we've been exchanging a bit of banter over the socials the last couple of months, and I've certainly learnt that Jay is one heck of a hunter. And as you'll find out in the content of the podcast, he also loves his fishing and motorbikes as well. Seems to be a bit of a theme running through the podcast so far. But we had a great chat with Jay this morning over a coffee, and got to know him a bit better and learn some ins and outs of his hunting journey and his outdoor pursuits. So please enjoy this, the third episode of the Hunting Republic podcast. All right, thanks for joining me on the podcast today on the Hunting Republic. I'm joined by Jay, and I'm not going to say your last name, Jay, because I don't know if you want me to. Or I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it correctly. So, Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me,
Thanks
mate.
for coming down, having a cuppa with me this morning. Let's get stuck in. So tell us a bit about yourself, mate.
I don't know. I suppose I lived in Bundy the last kind of decade, worked locally. Grew up kind of doing a lot more fishing than I did hunting. Still love me fishing, get into it, but I've recently kind of fallen back in love with bow hunting, and kind of been hitting that pretty hard lately. So
yep.
I don't know. I suppose where'd you want to start? I suppose like with my hunting, I guess where I started. With
yeah,
that,
mate.
or...
How'd you get into hunting? Like, have you been doing it since you were a young tacker, or?
No, not really. So I never really grew up hunting. Like when I was younger, I had a couple of older mates that used to have some dogs and used to go pigging. I'd kind of go with a run with them every now and again, but I wouldn't say it was something that I was really fully involved with. Like I've never had my own dogs or ute or anything like that. Probably got involved with it probably around 8 years ago.
Yep.
So I started working with a lad that I kind of knew from around, and we kind of become good friends, and he'd done a fair bit of bow hunting.
Yep.
So that kind of drew me into it. And I got my first bow. I think it was one of those little cheap red zone bows.
Red zones.
Yeah. So I started off with one of them, and I was kind of fortunate at the time because the job that I was in, we used to work out west a lot, so all around like Mooney, St George, Augathella.
Yep. Goat country.
Yeah. So I was able to get onto property owners for permission to hunt out on those properties through my work. So
Nice.
it kind of made the entry into hunting a lot easier for me in that aspect because I'm sure you know, like a lot of beginners, their biggest issue is land access.
Especially in Queensland.
Yeah, so I was kind of lucky in that sense. So I started hunting out west, mainly just pigs and goats, and kind of really fell in love with it. So I'd get back from work, I'd have properties lined up, and I'd head straight back out there and start hunting kind of thing. So, but for me, it was, especially with the bows, it was more so kind of learning how to stalk in on the animals and starting out, mate, I blew that many stalks. It wasn't funny. I was ready to give it up every day. But when you finally get in like 20 metres from a pig, because back then that was kind of the furthest shot I'd be comfortable taking. So I know you kind of get a real sense of reward out of it. So done that for a couple of years, and then I ended up having a motorbike accident probably about 5 years ago and broke my scaphoid in my right hand. So obviously couldn't shoot a bow during that recovery period. And with I don't know if you know much about the scaphoids, but probably the worst one to break in your wrist. So the recovery for that was quite long. And by the time it was in a position where I could shoot a bow again, I'd kind of moved on to different things. I'd bought another boat and kind of got back into fishing more so. And I suppose you'd be aware too, like if you don't hunt your properties regularly, it's pretty easy to lose your access to them as well. So I ended up getting out of it until last year. I was actually with the same mate that got me into hunting pretty much. I was out staying at his place.
He dragged you back in.
Yeah. Well, we kind of dragged both like each other back in really. So because I was working not far from where he lives. And it was the first time I'd seen wild deer. So I seen a red stag and a couple of hinds in a property I was working on. And I was staying at his place, and we got talking about it because back when I used to hunt, like deer was one of the things that I'd always wanted to tick off, kind of thing.
100%.
And then, like back then, I didn't really know much about the local area. I didn't know we had deer, a couple of hours from Bundaberg or anything like that. So I got to talking with him, and he actually knew the property owner quite well of the property that the deer were on. So we kind of got talking back and forwards about the old days of hunting and that. So we decided to get back into it. So dusted off the old bow that I had from before my accident and started practicing it a bit and ended up going out. It was a miserable day, mate, freezing cold, raining all day, didn't see any animals the whole day, and we were heading back to the ute in the buggy at the end of the day, freezing cold, couldn't feel our fingers, and just kind of looked to the right, like 100 metres back, like from where we were going to exit the gate, and here's this mob of deer. Well, I ended up getting there. I got my first stag there, so it was just a cull head, like a little, I think it was a 3x4, pretty old deer though. So butchered him up, like took the back legs and the back straps off him, just to kind of give it a go. And after that, I just kind of fell back in love with it. So I went and bought a new bow, started practicing a fair bit every afternoon after work kind of thing. And this year I've been hitting the bow hunting pretty hard. So
what's your choice of bow?
So I have owned a bear as well, but I mainly shoot Hoyt. So my first bow was Hoyt Vector Turbo. So that was my first, I suppose you call it proper bow. I went from that that old red zone one, which I don't really class as a hunting bow now that I kind of know a bit more about the topic. But so I bought a second-hand bow off eBay, and it was a Vector Turbo in 80 pound.
Yep.
Absolutely loved that thing, and back then still didn't really know too much about bows, so bought it second-hand. Turns out it was the wrong draw length for me. So I ended up
Did you pull about 30?
29 and a half.
29.
Yeah, that's what I ended up settling with. So ended up having to get new modules for the cams. So when I done that, decided to get some new bowstrings made up as well. And kind of got that dialed in. I love that bar, still do. I've still got it at home.
Yeah,
but
nice.
I've taken a lot of pigs and goats with it.
Yep.
And just after how that one's performed, I did buy a second bow just as a backup. I bought just a Bear Agenda 7. Never really used it other than just a bit of backyard shooting.
Yep.
When it come time to buy a new bow end of last year, I'd kind of tossing up whether changing to Matthews, because there's kind of mixed reviews on both sides of the fence. Like, it seems to be, I know it's a lot like in the fishing world, like people have their brands and they die by them. So
100%.
it's kind of hard to get an unbiased review. And at the end I thought, I've had Hoyt, I've had really good experiences with them, so I'll just kind of stick to them. And ended up going with the Ventum Pro 33.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so
I think it's a good balance between for a hunting bow.
Yeah.
It's funny that Matthews is probably one of the only bow brands that I haven't shot.
Yeah, right.
For whatever reason, Hoyt, Bowtech, PSE. I just haven't, for whatever reason, own a Matthews.
Yeah.
Back in the day when they sort of first hit the market over here, and the solo cam thing was their big selling point. It was very close at one point, but was probably a little bit more of a poor uni student back then. And I think the Bowtech came along at that point in time, and they were all the rage. So I ended up buying myself a new Bowtech. It's still one of those things. I think they make beautiful bows, and like you said, you did hear good reviews and whatever else. It's something that I think I'll pick myself up one day. I cruise the classifieds on Facebook and whatnot, and see some nice Matthews. I'm like, I'll get that one, and
Yeah.
But I've not long got my Brackenhoit that I call it, that I reconditioned there, the Factor 30, which is a 9-year-old bow. Got that all up to spec and reconditioned and everything I wanted to do with it. So I've got to put a few more miles on its belt before I look at spending more money. Forgiveness and permission and all those things we talked about before. So going back to when you first started, you said you went out with a mate, and you both got into it at the same time, or he was into it a little bit more so?
So he was into it more so. So he used to do like a fair bit of pigging with dogs as well out west. But a good mate of his was right into the bows. So he had definitely more experience in it than anyone I hadn't known anyone to bow hunt or anything like that. So he didn't do it kind of full on, but he had a fair bit of experience in the past with doing it. So we kind of got into it together once we started working together and that, because he hadn't done it for a little bit by then as well. Kind of fallen out of it. It was more so just a thing he'd do on occasions back then, because he mainly ran his dogs and that.
So would you say you sort of learnt the process together, or how sort of was he more of a? Did you have a little bit of a mentor role, I suppose? Or, did you have bush experience at that stage?
So as far as like walking bush and like tracking and spotting and stalking, I had zero experience. So he kind of led me, I suppose you could call it mentoring. Yeah, he kind of gave me all the starting information that I needed to kind of get me on the right track. And as you probably know, there's a lot of trial and error in that side of things. And like even to this day, like I went hunting with him this last weekend. Like we're still kind of learning things as we go. especially with different types of game. Like now that we're kind of getting into the deer, like we've blown quite a few stalks and some good stags, and I suppose it's something for me at least. I consider myself an amateur still pretty well. Like I have had a pretty successful season this year with deer. I think I've taken 14 or 15 red deer, majority with the bow. So I'm definitely not rubbish at it, but there's still been so many situations that I've learnt from and kind of had to readjust my strategy kind of moving forward with them sort of thing.
And that's something, it's just a theme or it's a point that you hear over and over and over again from hunters and bow hunters, particularly with getting or having to get in so much closer, is that, you know, every time you step out and every time you stalk something, you learn something. Yeah. You know, and you come away, you know, that little bit more informed, or, you know, you look at something slightly differently to what you might have previously, that then, you know, you can tuck away, keep in the back of your mind, and then, you know, you end up in certain situations the next time you're out or 12 months' time, and you go, you know, I've sort of seen this before, you know, and you can draw on those experiences to then put the pieces of the puzzle together a little bit quicker, I suppose. Yeah. And help things pan out. You know, increases your success rates, I suppose. Yeah.
Like, especially this day and age, like, we're lucky, like, with the YouTube side of things. Big time. Like, when my first, probably after I had my success with that first stag, proper fluke, first time ever hunted for him, got a stag, like, 100% a fluke, like, more ice and class for sure, but...
I know a few guys in that category, but with different animals.
Yeah. No, but after that, like, I had a fair few unsuccessful trips in a row. Like, I probably had maybe 8 to a dozen trips in a row where I kind of cooked it. Like, I'd get into deer and mess it up, and it was more so about also kind of learning the property I was hunting, how the deer behave and that. And I was on YouTube pretty much every night, laying in bed, kind of sussing out the situation, and probably the biggest thing I took away from it was to just like slow down and really kind of pan over and scan your surroundings more thoroughly before moving through. Like, because my only experience was hunting goats and pigs out west, where you're just walking a creek line or checking dams, and you know the areas they're going to be, so you're just on foot, kind of walking all day. Whereas the biggest learning curve I had transitioning into the deer is just being able to pull yourself up on a hillside, give it a proper glassing. Like, I had situations there, pulled up on a nice ridge, had a look through for 2 minutes, didn't see nothing, popped over the side, and then I've looked over and there's like 3 doe 150 metres from the side of the hill just feeding still, that I wasn't aware of were even there. Like, if I took that bit more time, I would have been able to spot them. Like, and by then I was out in the open and couldn't really put a stalk in on them. So but no, I think this day and age, like, there's a lot of good advice on, like, Facebook pages and forums and that, but you also get a lot of people that aren't particularly helpful at the same time. So I've found, me personally, just going on YouTube, like, there's a few good Aussie channels that hunt deer and that, and I probably learnt most of my strategies just from watching them. So
it definitely helps, and it's again, like you said, in this day and age, it's one of those things that is you know, like, it's an amazing resource to be able to tap into. You know, it increases your learning curves so rapidly. And back in the day when there wasn't anything like that, you know, it was the early 2000s when I got serious about hunting. Like I said, I was at uni at the time, and everything that existed online as far as hunting and animal behaviour, and the internet was still fairly new. It was all American. You know, and
all tree stands and whitetails.
And nothing wrong with that too. Especially, you know, that's just the way the World Wide Web works. But it was a struggle for a while there because the resources just weren't out there.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously, you know, since 2006, 7, when Facebook in particular started to explode, and as that's grown and the different avenues and functions and options in Facebook with your groups and chat stuff, and that's gone on.
Yeah.
You know, and then obviously you see Instagram, which isn't as much interactive, I suppose, as having groups on Facebook and that sort of thing. But, you know, and then as YouTube evolved as well, now I guess you say the podcast is getting massive too, because like myself, you know, yesterday at mowing the lawn, the headphones are on, the earmuffs are on, and I'm listening to, you know, becoming a bow hunter and, you know, different podcasts, different boys, and listening and learning, and, you know, hearing from fellas that have been hunting in different parts of the world or different parts of the country with different game and different species and different areas using different methods and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you're just learning and learning and learning. And it's absolutely incredible the amount of learning you can do without literally leaving your couch.
Yeah, that's right.
It's quite phenomenal. So you said you've taken a number of deer so far this season.
Yep.
What's your preferred method of dealing with them? As in, I'm not dispatching them, but, you know, butchering. What do you do with them?
So I'm a big, I suppose, I don't know the way to say it, but I pretty much harvest all the meat from the deer I take. So I personally think it's a great source of organic free range meat, very high in protein, low in fat.
Absolutely.
And some people carry on about deer and the like the gaminess of it and all that. I myself haven't experienced that. I don't find the flavour too offensive.
Yep.
I actually quite enjoy it. In saying that, I believe it has a lot to do with how the animal's dispatched and processed. So pretty much all my animals I've harvested, whether I used to kind of go through and field dress them, take the guts out, and either hang them up and start butchering them out there. But recently I've gone to like gutless dressing on the ground.
Yep.
I've found it a lot quicker for me anyway. So like the biggest thing is just the getting the meat down off the animal and cool down as quick as possible, I believe, to really help the kind of flavour of it.
Yep.
So yeah, look, I love it. We make at home, I do a lot of minces up, so we make everything from lasagnas, spaghettis, just simple hamburger patties, meatloafs, beer sticks, do a lot as steaks as well, and like just whole back straps reverse seared. Recently I've started making crumb steaks out of the rounds as well.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely unreal, mate.
Yeah,
Probably one of the best crumb steaks I've had. So look, as far as being a underutilized meat, I suppose, because a lot of people have a preconceived notion that it's like gamey and they'd be disgusting, so they won't really try it to begin with. Everyone I've gifted meat to have absolutely loved it. Like, and they're kind of asking for more. So
Nice.
yeah, like it's a very versatile animal as well. Like you can just do so many things with it.
Yeah.
And as far as like, I never really got into harvesting game animals for their meat until I got into doing deer. So I used to hunt. I would take the occasional meat goat as well, like a small young goat when I was hunting, but it was never really my primary focus. It was more so as a pest management side of things.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that was back in the days before the goat prices went up and property owners just seen them as a pest kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but recently I took a pig a few months ago. It's the first time I've eaten wild pig as well. So I've harvested lots of pigs before, but never taken meat other than dog food.
Yep.
But yeah, again, watching a few Australian YouTube channels. So Aussie Bush Harvest is the one that I watch mostly.
That's a good one.
Profki, yeah. So he's got a lot of good videos. I really enjoy his content, and he kind of made me curious about getting into the wild pork side of things. So harvested some meat off a young sow that I shot a couple of months ago, and made some smoked Kranskis with it. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
100%. Like with eating any wild game, I suppose, it comes to also checking the health of the animal, like the internal organs, making sure they're fat, healthy, not full of ticks, not mangy. Really comes down to, for pigs more so, in my opinion, about assessing the condition of the animal. And I even kind of went the further steps of freezing the meat before mincing it and making the Kranskis, and then obviously smoking them over that pasteurised temperature. But yeah, I'm a big believer of people should be harvesting their deers for the meat, not just letting them waste. Like I take the offal as well. Like I harvest the livers, and my mother-in-law makes dog treats out of them, dries them out and things like that. Just trying to utilise as much of the animal kind of as we can. Don't really want to be out there just killing them for no reason and letting them waste in a paddock.
I think it's something that's definitely we talked about it. Barry and I and Dave talked about it in the first episode, and Barry and I spent a fair bit of time talking about it, in the field when we were pulling up stumps and having a bit of a breather during our hunting. But it seems to be something that has, I don't know whether it's just a more accessible option for people with the educational content that's out there to help people become aware of what they can do, and that it's not as daunting or not as unsavoury or even unhygienic as in the past people might have thought it to be, or whether or not stuff during and post COVID where people sort of all of a sudden started asking themselves the question as to, well, if I can't get to the shop or there is no meat, what do I do? How do I do this? And, I think that's definitely something that's responsible for more people getting into hunting in the last few years. But I also think it's partly responsible for more hunters becoming more resourceful with what they take. Certainly a lot more hunters, I think, are taking and utilising pork than I've ever seen in the past. I think deer has always been a more favourable meat to harvest, or animal to harvest for meat. And I think they've always been regarded as just a cleaner, more domestic, not domestic, but beef-like, I suppose.
More.
They're not a carrion-eating animal for starters, and so they don't necessarily have that unhygienic or that sus sort of
that bit of
attitude.
A stigma attached to them that pigs do.
That's it. Eh? And look, don't get me wrong. I think in certain areas where there's a lack of vegetation feed for pigs, it's something you approach very cautiously. And feeding on carrion and stuff.
Touching on that point, like that's what I mean about assessing the health of the animal. Like most of the pigs I hunted out west back in the day, I probably wouldn't eat any of those because out there, like you probably know, hunting out west, they're pretty poor condition. They're eating a lot of roadkill. Sorry for cutting you off there.
No, it's all good, man. It's all good. No, and it's interesting too because when, like you said, you sort of got dragged back into it by your mate. Well, there's kind of a similar story with myself and my mate Bernie when he came back from living overseas and in the US, and he bought himself a compound bow, and he said, "Oh, you better teach me how to shoot this thing." And I better drag mine out and get stuck back into it.
Yeah.
We went onto a property here locally, and it was a former peanut farm.
Yep.
And pigs in there were just eating what was still left in the ground, which was still a fair bit of actual crop.
Yeah. Yep.
And we knocked over. We were just out there doing a quick look. The first time I'd ever been to the place, met the owner. We're just doing a walk around. It was only 350 acre property, so you're around it in an hour and a half sort of thing.
Yep.
And we came across this over this little rise, and as we crested the top, there's this mob of pigs and was like, right, Bernie, it's game on. Let's go. So he actually knocked over a sow and a boar out of the one mob, and we butchered those up. And I've never seen so much fat on pigs before.
Yeah.
You're talking 3.5 inches worth of fat, and 4 inches worth of fat. It was just insane. They were young pigs. The boar hardly had milk teeth, let alone tusks, but they would have been 70, 80, 90 kilo pigs. They were big pigs, but they were still young in the tooth. But they didn't even have a tick on them, let alone a worm in them. You know what I mean? Like, they were just ridiculously healthy and glossy, and
especially when you've had a lot of experience hunting, you can pretty well pick up on a healthy animal versus when it's pretty obvious when you see one that's got some concerning features to it. So,
and have you harvested goat, taken the shed before?
So I've harvested goat back when I used to hunt when I first got into it. Harvested a couple young goats. Just took kind of back straps. Just made curry out of them, things like that. Looking back now, how I've kind of evolved the way I look at hunting and more look at it as sustainability and some free range food, as well as helping the property owners out. Like at the end of the day, you're there to do a job for them, and if you're kind of letting animals go and not doing that job, well, you're not going to be allowed back on, kind of thing. So there is that aspect to it as well. But looking back now, a lot of the animals I'd harvested when I first started hunting, I see it as a very wasted opportunity to harvest meat out of them. As I said, back then I didn't even really think of it in the way of harvesting meat, and especially like the stigma back then to goats was kind of along the same lines as pigs. Like they're just dirty, stinking animals. Like the only one you'd take was a young one. So yeah, it was just kind of being a bit naive and not really looking into that side of things too much back then. But if I was to go out hunting now, I'd have no issues with going after goat for the meat specifically. Yeah,
it's one of those things. It's funny. I say it in a lot of different either fields that I've worked in, or even like parenting kids. Like you only know what you know. You can only do what you can do. Yeah. And if you don't really know any different, and I think back even going as far as, and I mentioned this in another episode as well, like way back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for a bow hunter to knock over a roo here and there. Yeah. And you go, well, it's a lot more knowledgeable, a lot more known nowadays, but natives are off the list.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to shoot them, it's illegal and they're protected. But back in the early days, it was just another thing you could shoot.
Yeah.
Not to say that people would hunt them, or target them specifically, but if one sort of hopped in between you and you wanted to, and if you're that way inclined, you just knock it off and not really think anything about it. But so yeah, you can only look back on that sort of stuff, I suppose, and go, literally, if I didn't know any different, I didn't know any different. And that's part of the learning journey, I suppose.
Yeah.
The more you learn, the more you realise that you can evolve through the process, and when it's something that comes out in that regard as a beneficial outcome, not only just as we mentioned before, learning stuff from other people with regards to either stalking methods or hunting strategies or whatever, but skills for yourself to then impart onto the process that you already have to make it more I don't know about fulfilling, but a richer process. You invest a lot in it, and the more you invest in it, the more you get out of it. And part of that, utilising that field dressing and the game and the meat, what you can take away. And as you said, you can gift meat to people, and you can make your own food. It just becomes more rewarding.
Same along the lines of like, for instance, when I first got into bow hunting, I knew nothing about bow form. Like, as you know, bow hunting's all about consistency. That's the number one thing. And it took me a long time to kind of be a proficient shot at bow. By the end of it, I was fairly good, in my own opinion, but like it's something starting over now that I'm only back into it the last kind of 9 months, is trying to just get that consistency back. And like as you were saying, touched on like progressing and moving forward and learning new things. Like back then, I bought all my arrows pre-fletched, ready to go out of the box. Knew nothing about bow tuning, anything like that. So starting over when I got my new bow, I kind of wanted to get more involved in the whole process of it. So like from buying bare shafts to like I fletch all my own arrows now. Went out and got myself a bow press and draw board.
Yeah, nice.
So rather than having my bow set up when I bought it, I just bought it brand new in the box. I set the peep, set the center shot, tied my D-loops, everything like that.
Yeah, cool.
And kind of made it more of a involved process of learning as I go.
Taking a bit of ownership for it.
And it is a lot more rewarding, like setting up my own bow, then fine-tuning it through paper, getting a perfect bullet hole is so much more rewarding when you've kind of went through the whole process of it of yourself. And I feel doing it that way too, you learn a lot more about the bow that you're shooting. Like especially I found with my new bow, I had to change my hand position a little bit because I was used to the older style of grips and I was getting a bit too much torque in the handle. So picking up on certain things like that through the tuning process, whereas back in the day, I wouldn't have even paper tuned. Like I used to shoot a lot of mechanical broadheads back in the day, just because they fly a lot truer to your field tips than your fixed blades. And yeah, it's another aspect of it too. Like now that I've gone through the in-depth process of tuning it all myself and getting it shooting right, paper tuned it and then broadhead tuned it. Like I've kind of transitioned to fixed blades now. Mainly due to the fact that I'm more understanding of how things work, and now I have my fixed blades tuned to how my field points are shooting. So it is a lot more rewarding experience, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
no, it just all adds in and adds in and adds in, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it sort of amplifies itself.
Yeah, the more you get involved with it, the kind of more you get out of it as well. So
So looking back when you first started, and I don't want to keep harping back to that, but it's just it's sort of, I suppose, more recent and more fresh in your mind than mine. You're not allowed to call me old. But you sort of, what was your basic kit? What would you go out with? You know, you were raw to it. You said you didn't know much about bushcraft or stalking animals and stuff. So what did you kick yourself out with then?
Consistently, I'd have just my bow, a quiver, my release, and that, even starting out, I didn't have a range finder, and maybe a bottle of water in a backpack kind of thing. Was about the only kit I had starting out. And even pretty well right through kind of my first initial phase of hunting, that's kind of all I'd have. I didn't even put any much thought into any different gear. Like I didn't even wear camo back then. Like I'd wear cotton long sleeve pants and just a button up and shirt, like a work shirt. That's what I'd go out hunting with, out west. It wasn't until I kind of got back into it that I really got more kind of gear focused on what I wanted to use and get into. Like not so much like obviously full camo, getting that, but also like getting into harvesting meat. I just had like a cheap backpack I got off, I think it might have been off eBay, like a camo backpack just to keep water bottles in. And soon learned it wasn't really cutting the mustard when it come to taking the ease off my back, so to speak, loaded full of meat.
Hauling meat.
Especially now. I'm not exactly old, but I'm not as fresh as I was when I started hunting. So,
how old are you, Jay? Come on.
33. So but so more so looking into like quality of gear. So like I switched to. Same thing, done a fair bit of research. I ended up switching to a Spiker Drover 40 litre with the aluminium meat frame on the back of it. And that was a complete game changer for me. Like if I'm walking meat out 2Ks through the hills, don't have any issue with that at all. Like, so I've been able to do kind of, I can pack out a whole doe in one trip, like with that bag. So And then it also comes down to, like, it's got the hydration bladder built into the back of it, things like that. And I suppose another thing is, like, from butchering the animals out in the field too, is just kind of trial and error of gear in that respect as well. So I've gone through a few different kind of knives. Like, I used to take out my Victorinox boning knife and a whole array of different knives kind of thing, just to get the job done. Whereas now I've kind of narrowed it down. I have one knife that I take out with me. It's a Havalon folding knife. So it's got I forget what they call the blades, but it's got the razor blades on one end and then just a fixed blade on the other.
Yeah, right.
So I do all my skinning, and if I do choose to gut them, I do that all with the razor blade. And then when it comes to boning, I switch to the fixed blade. So like, just kind of learning through it with trial and error with gear for butchering and that. Like, I've worked it down to, I used to take like 5 different knives to now have one that, you know, fits in my pocket pretty much, and I can break down a whole animal in the field just with that one knife now. So I suppose it just comes down to trial and error and learning what works best for you. If there's a position where you can get a vehicle to the animal, well then it's even better. You just drop the guts out of it and chuck it on the back kind of thing. But when you're up in the hills, you don't really get that luxury a lot of the time. So
well, that was a funny thing, talking about the 2 pigs at Bernie and I shot. One, the old mate stipulation with hunting on the block was that you take everything. You don't gut anything, you don't leave anything behind, you take the whole lot. And we'd literally never been to the place before, and all of a sudden we had these 2 pigs on the ground, and we were like, oh crap, you know, we got to get these things out of here.
Yeah.
So ended up, there'd been a bit of rain, and it didn't get bogged, but it was sticky.
Soft, yeah.
I drove the ute in and threw these 2. Well, luckily I had a spare tarp in the tray, the drawer in the back of the tray there. Managed to throw these 2 pigs up in the ute between the 2 of us, and then let's just say I was most amused when we got home. And the butchering efforts and the late night escapades in the shed after we were already in trouble for being late home.
It definitely takes a lot longer than you first imagine it too, doesn't it?
100%. 100%. She was a wild, I'll show that one. So, looking at, you know, speaking of gear and stuff like that now, you've mentioned your bow, so you run a set of binos in. What sort of binos do you use?
So I run pretty much all my optical gear, I suppose, is all Bushnell. So I run a set of 42x8 Bushnell binos. So I've got the Spiker bino harness, and then I've got the Bushnell Prime rangefinder. So I kind of moved towards that higher end rangefinder due to the fact that I got my rifle license last year as well. I wanted to move to a bit of rifle. But the Bushnell Prime has both rifle and bow settings in it. And the main part is, for me, was hunting in hills with the bow, like shooting on those steep angles.
That inclination.
It calculates that, and it'll tell you what distance to aim for rather than the actual distance it is and things. So, look, I can't fault either of the units really. I don't know too much about optics in that world. Like the binos I've got, the Bushnell binos I've got, are the first binos I've ever bought. So again, out west, never really done any kind of glassing of areas. It was just on the foot all the time. So another big learning curve has been being able to sit there and actually get on the binos and have a good look around sort of thing. But look, for not ever using binos before, I've found them really good and easy to use kind of thing. So, but yeah, I'm probably wouldn't look at upgrading them for the foreseeable future. I think they do a good enough job. So
well, that's it. I think there's a certain level of glass that you get to that is more than adequate without being, super expensive.
Yeah.
We both know, and everyone listening knows how much money you can spend on gloves, be it on the top of your rifle, be it on your binos, a spotting scope or a rangefinder or whatever. But it's extraordinary, and then that's not even touching on camera lenses and stuff if you get heavily into that side of it as well.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely a threshold level where anything under that's shit.
Yeah.
And not even worth. You might take it to the footy, but you sort of cross that threshold, and it tends to become, definitely adequate for the job.
Yeah.
And sure, you can spend a lot more money, and you can have all that extra clarity and that extra low light performance and those sorts of things. But it is one of those things, I think, with most hunters, I reckon, almost like we would probably say every hunter, that you'll get to that threshold and you'll go, okay, well, I'll invest that little bit extra money, and I'll buy this pair this time because I'm upgrading from that pair, and or it's my first pair, and I've read good things about this or whatever. And then you go, you know what, these are really good, and I think they're an item that will do the job for a very long time when you look after them. And then by the time you feel like you've outgrown them, or they have worn out, or you damage them, whatever, you've got a really good idea as to, well, are they adequate for the different types of hunting I do?
Yep.
And do I need to, spend the thousands on something far more expensive, or will the same sort of money suffice again and last me another 10 years?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think they're one of those bits of kit that threshold level is a really good point for most people to try to bump a little bit of coin up to get to.
Yeah.
And then they get a really good, window of use out of that bit of kit.
Yeah.
To then be very informed when it comes around to making the next decision for the next time.
Yeah, I suppose I can see that firsthand too. Like I off the top of my head, the binos I bought were around that 400 mark.
Yep.
Which I suppose you'd call mid tier, low to mid tier kind of optics. They certainly do get a lot dearer than that. And my mate that got me back into hunting, and we hunt together, he went out and got a set of binos, and he didn't really see it as much of a necessity, so he went to kind of the more entry-level kind of binos around that 150 mark. And look, after a couple of months, he ended up stepping them up a bit, so he ended up replacing those to what he's got with now. So I think it is something that you can kind of overlook when you're first kind of starting. I was lucky. I went into the shop in town here when I got my binos, and I was able to at least test a few of the different ranges. So again, situations are different hunting, like as you said, like low light and glass clarity in those kind of situations, but at least I could have a bit of an insight to them. So like I stood out the front, looked at a road sign, a K down the road, and kind of made my judgment on how kind of crisp I could get the vision on that. So that's why I ended up kind of settling with that mid tier, because I could read a road sign from a kilometre away, and I did have that thought process behind me that, like, I'm kind of just getting back into it. I just bought a new bow, all the gear to go with it, of course, like all your quivers and stabilisers. So the bill was racking up pretty high, and still hadn't passed it through the Minister of Finance at that stage. So I had to kind of come up with my arguments as to why I needed it. So I kind of dropped down to that mid tier, but in my personal experience, I've had a good kind of 6 months on them now, and for the price range, I haven't been able to fault them in all honesty. So yeah.
Yeah, nice. You said you do a bit of fishing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I love fishing.
You love fishing.
I don't know. There's a lot to talk about. Whether you kind of want to start, or
so do you go offshore? What's your preference?
The last few years, I've been kind of getting into offshore a lot. Got heavily involved in kayak fishing for a while as well.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so I've still got my fishing kayaks, but they're just collecting dust at this stage now, which is a lot easier with the outboard. So, but then transitioned to a lot of river fishing with the tinny, and And then kind of, I suppose it's like hunting, I guess, just the evolution of things, like starting out with the basics and like now doing offshore trips and overnight trips out the reef. And but yeah, fishing's one thing I've done since I was a kid. Pretty well my first love, and got me to enjoy the outdoors originally, I suppose.
Yep. And did you grow up local?
So I grew up originally on the Gold Coast when I was younger, and then I moved to Childers just as I was entering high school. So
Yeah, right.
look, they wouldn't classify me as a local, but I've been in the area for a fair while. So done my high schooling in Childers, then kind of moved away for a bit, moved around a little bit, and then settled back in the area, and I settled back at Ep3 Creek, and then moved to Bundy itself probably around 6 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And what you've got your own? Obviously, you said you've got your own boat.
Yeah. So I've got two. I've got a just my riverboat, which is a 4.2 metre tinny, and then my reef boat's a 6.5 Vision CJ centre console, which I was lucky enough to actually win.
Yeah.
So
Boyne-Tanham?
Yeah, the Boyne-Tanham hookup, mate. Yeah.
When was that?
Unreal, mate. Like I won that 2020, so I've had that 3 years now. So
Fantastic.
I don't know. It was kind of come at the best time, sort of thing, because I'd been taking my little 4.2 metre offshore because I just started getting into reef fishing. Absolutely fell in love with it. And so I actually split the hull on me smaller tinny. I got kind of went out the 15 mile. Kind of got stuck in a bit of a blow up out there, and split the hull. And the wife kind of put her foot down and said, "Yeah, no more reef fishing until you get a bigger boat." So
good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, look, darling.
Yeah, I didn't complain. Yeah, so I was actually in the process of.
I just won this. Yeah, well, the bank balance is 20 grand less, 30 grand less, but I just won this, honestly.
Yeah. So I was actually in the process of selling my smaller boat and two of my motorbikes to put a bit of money towards getting a bigger boat to go out reef. And even with selling those, I was kind of only looking at getting like a second-hand 5 metre boat was kind of the best I could do with the budget that I had, kind of thing. So I literally had someone coming down on the Wednesday to look at one of my motorbikes, and I had someone coming down the following week to buy the boat. And then I actually won that boat on the Sunday. So I had to message them both and say, "Oh, look, they're not for sale anymore." I'm
keeping the toys.
Yeah. So, took me months to for it to sink in that I'd actually won it. So,
That's awesome.
In saying that, the wife reckons it's the worst thing to happen to us because I've probably spent about 30 grand on the boat since winning it. So upgraded the outboard on it, and then just all the electronics in it, pretty much kitting it out to pretty well my dream boat. So still pretty good, 30 grand for my dream boat kind of thing.
Do you have a favourite target species? You can't say red deer. We've covered that.
Yeah. So as far as offshore, it's a bit of a controversial topic with the Spanish mackerel situation.
Yes.
But for kind of the hard-hitting trolling aspect, one of my favourite things with target were Spanish mackerel. They still are, but obviously the bag limits are a lot less. But I could get into a whole political debate about that, but I don't think this is.
I suppose we can do a little bit of background for people who aren't aware or into fishing that the limits of keep have been drastically reduced on the Spanish mackerel just this year. Yeah,
so it's come into effect this financial year, so it's in effect now. So they've opened up seasons for them, which is more than acceptable. Their seasoning requirements can, in my opinion, are a little bit off of when their actual breeding times can be, because obviously every area is different, but they're all also migratory. But the biggest controversial thing is, so I think it was 2 years ago, they changed the limit. It was 3 per person, and they changed it to having a boat limit of maximum 6, no matter who's on board, a couple of years ago. Wow. And then as of this financial year, they've dropped it back from 3 per person, a max of 6 per boat, down to 1 per person and a maximum of 2 per boat. So it is a quite drastic kind of change, and that's the issue I have. Look, and it's kind of on part on recreational fishers as well, because a lot of times when you have people doing, like the fisheries doing surveys at the boat ramp, people aren't honest about what they've caught, so it can kind of give a false kind of insight of fish stocks. But as I said, we could get involved with a long conversation about the Spanish. But the thing I personally have issue is I've been fishing for them for a while. I've never noticed any decline on our coast anyway. And it was always a good fish. Like, I take a lot of people that don't get to go fishing a lot. And bottom fishing can be very kind of tired and moon phase depending as well. Definitely. So it was always a good thing when I was taking people that hadn't had a lot of experience with fishing, haven't caught a big fish. I've got my certain spots where I go for Spanish that I've never been there and not caught Spanish. Like, they've always been a regular at the spots that I go to. So it was always a good fallback for me to take someone out and let them catch a fairly large fish, like a big fish in their opinion. Like your school-sized Spanish of like 8 kilos is a massive fish for most people that don't do a lot of fishing. And it's kind of moved back now that only having a possession limit of 2. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is mackerel don't release well. So, like, if you're going to have people that are just targeting your bigger size Spanish, they're going to be dropping a lot of Spanish back overboard that are going to ultimately die. Yeah. So, with Spanish, you need to pretty well de-hook them in the water straight away. Otherwise, a lot of the time they will die. So, I think potentially it could cause more issues than helping the situation, but at the same time, there's nothing we can do. The laws have passed. We've got to kind of work with these new laws and see if we can look at getting them kind of revised in the near future.
See, I thought that was something that was going to happen. It was for a period, and there was going to be a revision process.
So from my understanding, there isn't. There's potential to be a revision. I could be wrong. I could be kind of talking out of my arse here, but from what I'm aware of, the chains are permanent, and there are people pushing for a revision period. But from how I understand it at the moment, it's that's pretty much it from now moving forward in the near future. And as I said, there's lots of things we can go into, but lots of variables in the situation. But I don't know, I think kind of how it was brought in could have been done a little bit better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I certainly heard a lot of that around the traps.
Yeah, so, and as I said, like I generally take a fair few people fishing that don't get to do it often, and Spanish is one of those, for me anyway, in this area. It's a consistent fish. I know I can go out like...
Oh, it's a staple fish in this area, isn't it?
Yeah,
100%.
And we don't have to spend a full day on the water too. No. I can take them out and we'll be home by 9 o'clock and have a few Spanish in the esky kind of thing. So for me, they're kind of my favourite. So I've kind of waffled on a bit there. No. To get back on track, they're probably one of my favourite fish to target. Yep. But in general, I like any kind of fishing. Like for sure. any kind of fishing gets me going. Yep. Like whether it be freshwater, spinnerbaits for bass in Saratoga, to like I got into about a year and a half ago into micro jigging a fair bit out reef. Absolutely love micro jigging. So I bought electric reels to go out fishing off the shelf. Still haven't done it though. I talked myself into buying a 1 kilowatt transducer and getting an electric reel set up and everything, telling myself I'm going to go off the shelf. And I got some red country that I like fishing. That's about...
That's red.
Red emperor. Yeah.
Not red deer.
Yeah, no. We're off the deer species now. So yeah, no, red emperor. But
because you can sit in red deer country and fish yellowbelly, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there'd be a few bass out there too in some of the places I hunt for them. But I
know a very funny story of a friend of mine who was fishing on Crestbrook and saw some happenings with a red deer. I won't go into it right now, but let's just say there were some interesting antics on the banks with hunters and red deer. But yeah, time for another story. Hopefully I'll get him on the podcast because I'd love to hear him tell the tale.
Yeah. So yeah, like where I go fishing for red emperor. It's another probably 15 kilometres to the shelf. And I got a few starter marks off some blokes I know, and just never made that extra push to go out there and do it, because lately in Bundaberg, the weather windows we've had have been absolutely atrocious. So it's kind of picking what I want to do.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoy doing overnight trips out towards the islands as well.
Yep.
But same thing, you need a good run of weather out there.
Yeah.
So especially in it's a centre console boat. So when we're camping on the boat, we're just in the open kind of thing. So
Yeah,
when she gets rough and you get a bit of spray on you and that,
I got to say, I'm rather envious. I don't have the stomach for the ocean. I don't have the stomach for travelling much at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
My last adventure chasing any sort of Spanish was around Christmas time up at Myra with my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
So we're staying up there, and he's like, "Oh, we'll get up in the morning. I've got some marks out the front here, and we'll try for some Spanish." I'm like, "Oh, sounds great, you know." And I forgot to take some travel calms or whatever it was that I needed to have, and I didn't even have breakfast, which was another, faux pas. Anyway, so I cruise out the river and it's all good. The river was very, very calm. Get out the front there and it's choppy. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to be good. And it's like, oh, no, we'll just try. We're not going to pull up an anchor or anything. So, we'll keep moving, be all right. And usually with me in boats, if they're moving, I'm all right. But trolling and actually travelling, completely different. You may as well be anchored up.
Yeah.
And we went backwards and forwards around these marks about 6 times, and my brother-in-law pulled in 3 or 4 Spanish, and I think I threw up about 12 times.
You were just burling up for him, mate.
So by the time I couldn't even lift my head anymore, I'm like, oh, dude, we got to go back in. It's like, yeah, right. And we ended the mouth of the river and cruised along, and within 5 minutes, I was fine.
Yeah.
It was just shit out.
Yeah.
So,
it's funny, like the old seasickness though, it's pretty unforgiving. Like I've had people out that you look at them and like most people I explain, like if you come down my boat, we don't go back in. Like if you have you been on the ocean, do you get sick? Yeah, no, I'm fine. I don't get sick. I'm like, well, just so you know, once we get out there, we're out there for the day. Some of them start yodeling over the side, not even halfway out, and it's like, oh, you're gonna have a rough day, eh? Like,
I mentioned a little bit in previous episodes. I lived overseas for about 5.5 years and did a lot of flying during that period. Yeah, and planes and I don't go well either. Yeah, so it almost gets to the point now where if I don't have medication and I haven't sorted that out within half an hour, the seatbelt lights go out and I'm up and I'm throwing up. Or over and done with now. All right, let's get on with it. It's just one of those things I've just learned to live with. You know? And buses and trains, the whole works. Yeah, right. But so you also mentioned before that you've got your firearms license. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Got me I said last year I got my firearms license, but that's a bit of a porky. I actually got it the year before, I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
so I something I thought about getting for a while and never really kind of put much more thought into it other than, it'd be nice to have. And at that stage I wasn't getting back into hunting. So but I ended up, a fella from work, he got his and kind of explained how easy it was. Like I did have my firearms license when I was younger. Like I had my youth license. I used to shoot with my old man a bit in the ranges at Childers, and then kind of moved out of home and just completely forgot about it. Like, so I ended up, he talked me into just might as well go get it kind of thing. So I went and got me license, and then had me license up until last year, and got that first year. So I decided, well, it might be good to kind of get a firearm in the arsenal. Yep. And my old boy had a Howard 223 there that he'd had for a while.
May or may not have what I just recently picked up myself.
Yeah, so nice. And he wanted to gift that to me as my first rifle kind of thing. So got the permit to acquire and everything, and got the 223, and it was kind of like getting into bow hunting to start with again. It was a whole new kind of way of learning to do things kind of thing.
I appreciate that.
people think that rifle hunting, it's easy. You got a rifle, you can just shoot them from a couple hundred meters away. You're fine. Or it's not that case.
I think it's
like,
very interesting because it was only a few months ago I took my first pig with the 44 mag, and I said on another podcast episode that the first one we did, we were actually out at Mara when we recorded the podcast, and I've been out there a few months before. I dropped the pig, but I whacked it from 25 meters.
Yeah.
I stalked in on it, and it was just, it wasn't a matter of I could shoot this from 50, I could shoot this from 100. I was shooting inch groups of 100 off the cuff, but my mindset was just, this is what I do. This is how I hunt.
Yeah.
And the thing didn't take another step. It just absolutely knocked it square on its ass.
Yeah.
But it was just, I had to stalk in and mind the wind, and there was the cattle there I had to push off to the side, and hope they didn't go the wrong way and that sort of stuff, and approach it that way. So I think it's a funny crossover with bow hunters when we get into the rifle side of things, that the mindset of the way we hunt doesn't necessarily step away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we still have that hunter, or that close quarters hunting. Because don't get me wrong, rifle hunting is still hunting, but that close quarters hunting that we're sort of practiced at, and it's just our mindset that it's okay. Well, pushing to get into that distance, and there's something about that I don't think ever goes away. Yeah. Yeah.
And I noticed too, just with myself personally, like on what we touched on earlier about like Facebook groups, you get a lot of support in them, but there's also a lot of that go the other way in them as well. Like, I've taken deer with my 223.
I know where this is going.
And a lot of people will start. I've had messages of people cussing me out and that, and be shooting nothing less than a 308 and carrying on. And I come from the mindset that's what I try to explain. Like, I come from in mind of archery hunting. Like, it's all about shot placement and being confident in your shot, and also not taking ridiculous shots. Like, 223 is more than enough to kill red deer humanely and effectively under a shorter distance, with correct shot placement. And trying to explain people that, take your 308, you gut shot a deer, it's going to run off as well with your 308. For me, it's more about the shot placement, and also knowing your terminal velocity of of the pill you're sending down, like how much foot pounds you're going to need for a larger kind of animal, and keeping it within that 150 metre range with a 223. I personally, I'm shooting 60 grain ballistic tips. I've had absolutely great success with the deer I've taken with them.
Knocked one over yesterday, day before?
Not a deer. So I went hunting this last weekend, a couple of days ago with a mate. Had the opportunity to go out on a block that I can only kind of hunt with him. But the way the wind was, it was absolutely shocking. We come through the gate. It was only a 1,000-acre block. Come through the gate, straight over the first hill. Here's a mob of 7 to 10 does and one spiker in there. Just that already busted it from the get go. Look, they were at 200 metres. If I had like a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 308, I'd be more than confident in taking a shot at them at 200, no dramas. But with the 223 in hand, happy to just kind of let them walk. It's kind of at that limit of what the cartridge is capable in my opinion. So, just kind of let them walk. But we kind of changed our game plan because coming through the gate kind of blew our scent across the whole paddock anyway. Changed our game plan and went to another block that my mate had just down the road, and in search of some pigs. Within 2 minutes of being there was a mob of pigs down the dam in this little bit of a swampy country. So it's not really swampy, but in the wet it gets a bit swampy down there. But so he took his bow. So this is the same one that kind of got me back into hunting, and we kind of got each other back into hunting. So we both bought a new bow at the same time. So because he didn't have a bow at the time, he had his rifles, but so we kind of both bought Hoyts last year at the same time, kind of thing. So
is he local bloke?
Yeah,
Bundy
he's
day?
yeah he
Yeah,
enjoys
nice.
his Hoyt. So he ended up going because he wasn't too sure if he wanted to get right back into it. So he went. He didn't end up going with the flagship. He went with the next tier down from the Ventum. I think it's the Axis or yeah, I can't off the top of my head. I can't remember the name, but it's the step down from the flagship kind of bow, just to see if he kind of wanted to get back into it full time. But even that, he loves that bow, like unreal bow to shoot. Like he took a pig on the weekend, so yeah. So he took the bow, I took the rifle, and got in on this mob of pigs. And wind was absolutely perfect from the get go. Like we stalked into this dam that they were kind of moving towards, and then they moved out straight in front of us, like out in the open, perfect. So he got one with the bow and got a couple with the gun. So picked kind of, there was one kind of big stinky bull, we left him, but got the meat off the other. So, but yeah, it was great. Kind of went from a dud trip, being busted first thing in the morning and having to just sit there and watch him because he only had his bow with him and I had the 223. So kind of sit there and watch those mob of deer walk off to being successful with a few pigs. Like, yeah, it's just all about being adaptive, I suppose, and kind of knowing when the gig's up, like having your scent. Like we had probably 25 knot winds.
Yeah,
there.
it's pretty crap on the wind.
As soon as we got up over that ridge, because as we were coming into the property, it was fine. It had a bit of a back swirl and wasn't too strong. But as soon as we got on top of that ridge, it just blew our scent down the hole. And it's kind of a long, skinny block as well. Our chances of success were pretty much nil after that, because even if it hadn't blown our scent, obviously we'd have to get to the back of the block and then work our way out. But there was no way of getting to the back of the block bar going straight down the guts of it. So yeah, it's just kind of bit of a learning curve. Probably should have checked the wind before we went there and things like that.
It's funny you say that, because in a little bit more recently, I've actually downloaded the Windy app on my phone, which you probably use for boating.
That's what I have for my fishing.
And I've done that specifically with properties in mind. Yeah. Mostly because I don't go out fishing anyway, but I stick to barra from the riverbank. I found that very useful, particularly if there's a little bit of turbulence in the weather. And the other day, Friday, Saturday around here, she was a bit sort of bit of guesswork with that bit of rain and those clouds and that kicking through like they were. But out of the block that I hunt at Marra, which is it's nice and big and flat out there. Yeah. You know, it's that weather that might cause the issues. You know, and you can typically bank on the wind doing certain things. You know, pre sun up, and then once the sun is up, you go, okay, what's going to come from here? So I'll back out and I'll come around here and I'll hunt that area or that direction or whatever. But that Windy app is really useful for that. Yeah, you know, you can zoom right in and see what's going on.
And I suppose to touch back on what we were speaking about earlier, as far as kind of learning new strategies of hunting too, like hunting with thermals in mind, like because a lot of the country I hunt for deer is hilly country. So as far as hunting with your thermals in mind, something I never even knew was a thing. Like you can have a 5 knot northerly and be coming up a slope on sunup, and it's just dragging your scent straight up that hill, and it's negating whatever wind you've got coming back towards you, kind of thing. So I suppose it comes back to keeping all that in mind as well, especially with thermals. Like if you've got a strong enough wind to kind of override that, and the whole weather side of thing is one of the biggest sides to hunting, in my opinion. Like especially with spot and stalk hunting, like the weather, as you know, probably countless of times yourselves, the wind swirled at the last minute of a stalk and just busted the last 2 hours of legwork you've put in. Like
I mentioned it again in a previous episode where being out at the block at Marra, and I took my mate Brady out, who's a new hunter but hasn't dropped anything yet. Yeah. And every time we've been out there, Murphy's turned up, and we'd been walking along. We came along to this water hole, big, long, not very wide water hole, probably 60 metres across, and it was dry all the way along that bar, you know, down towards the far end. And as we're walking along, Brett was on one side of it, sort of on the tree line, I was on the other. and these two big boars down the far end just walked down, bang on midday, have their drink, have a bit of a wallow. And I was like, oh, we're on here, you know. And they were on my side, and I motioned to Brett to come back over to where I was because there was a nice pad to walk up to and a few trees to hide behind and that sort of thing. And anyway, they didn't play the game. They didn't get spooked. They didn't get winded. We didn't get winded, anything like that. But they just didn't play the game. They ended up turning and going back up into the long grass. And so I thought, oh, we'll follow them up there and go through the grass and up where there's a whole bunch of another water course up the top with a bunch of brigalows. And we're sort of walking through there and sort of trying to pick the line that they might have gone. And I spotted this big black and white boar, and he wandered up this water course, standing brigalows, and then for some reason he's basically done like not a 180, but he's done a full cutback, and he's going to come back past us. And I motioned to Brett, you know, like, he's coming, get ready, you know. And this big boar's walked behind this bush at about it would have been 18, 20 metre mark.
Yep.
And, you know, Brady was doing the new hunter, sort of getting him ready sort of thing. And and I'd actually knelt down and I'd drawn back and had an arrow ready, you know, for whatever. I wasn't going to shoot it first, but, you know. Yeah. And you saw this big boar just walk out, just came out perfectly past this bush, and he just stopped. And I was recording with my GoPro at the time, and you literally just saw the tips of the grass, which was about 3.5 foot high, and it's just puffed ever so gently back the other way. Yeah. And within the half a second, he's just gone. Yep. And you're just like, come on. You know, like, he just would have walked, and Brady eventually would have had a shot of about 15 or 16 metres. Yeah, yeah. And you're just like, man, like, A, they didn't stay there and wallow longer in the middle of the day. And then B, just Murphy turns up and the wind just... Yeah,
right at the wrong time. Every time, like, I've especially starting off too, back in the day, I had a lot of blown stalks, like, just from swirling wind and not really knowing how to approach a situation, and, like, especially with goats and that, like, moving forward out of the wind to cut them off where you think they're going to be heading, things like that. Like, yeah, you just learn things every trip you go out, kind of thing. 100%. But yeah, I think the weather's the biggest thing to overcome, especially with that wind. Like,
and knowledge of your block too, eh?
Yeah, well, that's right. Like
as
I was saying earlier with the deer, like, so many unsuccessful trips, and like it's gotten to the point now where once I'd kind of worked out the lay of the land, because there's a few different mobs of deer on the property, like how each one kind of works, where their home base area is. Since that first run of not harvesting any animals, every single trip I had, once I started getting them, I haven't had a trip where I haven't been successful on that block. So it just goes to show, like a lot of people can get discouraged, like they got these grand ideas of going out and getting a monster stag on their first trip and all that, but if you really want to put the effort in, it goes a long way to kind of do all those empty trips, but not just do them, kind of at the end of it assess why things went wrong, kind of make a plan for the next time you want to go back. And I was kind of lucky as well, like my wife letting me do as much hunting as I do. Like it could have been quite easy for her to just say, no, you've been out every weekend for the last 6 weeks. Like, but the block that I hunt being only 2 hours from home, like, and a couple of blocks even closer than that, I was able to go there kind of every weekend consistently.
Just do a day trip?
Yeah, do a day trip, like, just to keep... Sometimes it depends, because if my wife was working all weekend, I'd go out and just camp on the block. Oh, yes. If she was only working one day, well, that's the day I'd just do a day trip down there, kind of thing.
There's a lot to be said for the places close enough for day trips, hey? Yeah. It's something that that some hunters are very fortunate to have. Yeah. And it's something that a lot of hunters would give their left arm for. Yeah. It really is something pretty fortuitous to have. Yeah. And for the most part, I don't think it matters what the game is. Yeah. You know, there was a block that I had access to here, not far out of town, only 5 acres, but just rabbits everywhere. More rabbits on a block than I've ever seen in my life in Queensland. This area of Queensland. Yeah, yep. And the owners there were just like, just come out and whenever you like. It's only 5 acres, but basically it had a creek running through it and some good stalking spots that you could move from sort of one side of it to the other, and by the time you came back again, the rabbits were back. But it was just somewhere to go and hunt something. And no, it wasn't pigs or goats or deer or any of the bigger game. But it was really, really good fun and good value, and it was only 45 minutes drive.
That's right. So
Yeah.
No, I did luck into the kind of the blocks that I hunt, so I'm pretty lucky because I don't have really any local blocks around Bundaberg. Like, in saying that, I haven't put any effort into trying to get on any local blocks, just because I've been focused on on the properties I do have access to, and like I touched on earlier, like you're there to do a job for the landowner as well. Like his main concern is pest control. And that's why, like, I copped a lot of flack online as well for taking as many does as I did this season, which for me, getting a big trophy, that's awesome. Good to have on the wall, but it's not what I'm there for. Like, don't get me wrong, they're good to get. And if I see one in a mob, well, of course, I'm going to target that one. But at the end of the day, I'm there to reduce numbers for the property owner and harvest meat for myself. And like I had a lot of kind of people messaging me and telling me, oh, look, there was some pretty colourful language, but
I think it's bullshit,
and telling me that I'm going to ruin the block and all this. But at the end of the day,
but is it their block? No.
At the end of the day,
if you want to ruin your block, you ruin your block.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. I just can't cop other hunters telling other hunters what they should or shouldn't do in that space.
And that's what I mean. Like, for one, it's not their block. For two, all those 14, 15 deer I took were actually off 4 or 5 blocks, not all off the one property. 3, the deer numbers on the blocks that I'm taking are insane. I think I sent you a video of a mob of, no joke, 40 hinds.
Yep.
All on a hillside. Like, the numbers down there are unbelievable. And kind of double-edged sword because people kind of think, oh, well, it's easy to go shoot deer then. Well, even with numbers, they're
not in a pen and they're still deer.
Yeah, the more deer there, the more eyes that are on you as well, kind of thing.
100%.
But at the end of the day, I'm there to provide a service to the landholder to keep my access because I'm fairly lucky. Like I'm one of only 2 people that can hunt on the property, so it's in a very well sought after area as well. So I kind of lucked into getting access to the block, but I've also got to keep that relationship with the landholder to keep my access on that block. And it comes down to small things like there was one trip up in the back of the block there where there's no vehicle access. I noticed a small amount of giant rat's tail coming up. So I let him know about it, and like the next trip I done the following weekend, I took a small spray bottle on my kit with me in there and kind of sprayed that rat's tail for him. Actually, the last trip that I had out there a few weeks ago, where I took a stag that I'd kind of been chasing for a couple of trips, he'd given me the slip on. There was a fence that was down as well. I had some ratchet strainers in my ute, just restrained the fence for him and let him know, like, just kind of actively helping the landowner as well. Like, goes a long way.
Yep.
So
sure does. So, what would you say? Like you said, you've sort of been, it's fresh in your mind when you first started out, and you've sort of done it for a bit, stepped away for a bit, come back to it. What advice would you give somebody new to the sport?
To the sport of bow hunting is just kind of keep at it, get out there, like practice every single day. Like as far as being proficient with your bow, it's just all about getting out there and shooting it. And then like for me, it breaks down into 2 subjects. There's the proficiency of shooting with your bow, and then the whole hunting aspect side of things. So for me, in my opinion, I think you're best off just getting proficient with your bow before you even think about going out to take an animal.
Absolutely.
Which can be frustrating because I know how hard it is getting started, becoming accurate and not kind of understanding, kind of using your anchor points and your bow torque in your hand and and you follow through on your shot, not pushing your bow down. Like you could sit there and list off things for hours of what goes into it. But I think the main thing would be, just keep at it and utilise your resources, like your forums on Facebook and YouTube is, in my opinion, the biggest thing. You do get a lot of contradicting information on the YouTube side of things as well, but just trialling everything kind of, and then once you feel like you're good enough with a bow, then it's just about getting out there and having a go, really. Like, as I said, I got skunked the first 8 to a dozen trips out there, didn't get anything, which can be disheartening in some ways, but you just kind of got to persist and learn from each trip that you've done and try and think of how you can approach it differently and just stay consistent with it, really. Yep. Like, consistency, I guess. That's the main driving force.
And as again, the same sort of frame, what would you see and how do you see hunting in this day and age with regards to social aspects, social acceptance? Like how does it go for you, for example, in a work setting?
So with a work setting, for me, not too bad. Like, I don't really talk about it unless I know people are fine with it. Like, I suppose that's not really true to a degree, but generally the blokes I work with, they don't have an issue with hunting. A lot of them don't care either way. One fellow I actually took out hunting with me. I got him his first deer.
Yeah, nice.
But as far as a social aspect, it can be a pretty red hot topic. I try and stay away from as much kind of controversy as I can, but at the same time, I'm still open to discussion with people that are against it or kind of maybe even sitting on the fence, where I'm more than happy to have discussions with them so they can see it from my point of view. Like, we're not just out there just mowing down everything that we see, and like, we care about the animal having a quick, humane death, I suppose, which in my opinion is a lot nicer than what happens to them in nature, whether it be old age or animal attacks. But then that also open up a whole nother discussion with them on that side of things. So it's kind of can be an endless rabbit hole that you go down with people. And generally, you got two ends of the spectrums. You got the hunters and you got the anti-hunters, and either one aren't going to change their views no matter what conversation you have with them. So it's more so the people, not so much in the middle not so much on the fence about it, but that don't understand about it and don't understand why we do it, is the biggest kind of people you want to start a conversation. Obviously, if they're not wanting to pursue a conversation in it, like, it's important not to push it as well. But look, I've had literally last week while I was out at work, I was having a chat with someone at the pub that I was staying at that was against it. And kind of by the end of it, he was kind of asking me if I was coming back out, if I could bring some venison out for him to try. So, I think in some situations it's definitely people not understanding and just being open to that conversation. But at the same time, realising that 9 times out of 10, you're not going to change anyone's opinion. You can only kind of hope to educate them a bit better. Like, yes, there is blokes in the sport that kind of ruin it for the rest of us, but for the ones that are doing it the right way and have animal welfare in mind, I think it's important to be able to open up a conversation about the topic. But me personally, like, I'll waffle on a bit, and I'm not the most fluid with my discussions, so I can get a bit confusing. I reckon I've got about an hour and a half worth of
audio here that says otherwise, mate.
I think it is very important to open those discussions socially, but at the same time, not expect to go changing anyone's opinion anytime soon. But
I think personally, like, having been around this for a very long time, I just try and hope that, especially, in what is 2023, that we can expect the acceptance of what we do, given that we are of the right attitude in regards to, like you said, effectively and humanely dispatching animals in the right way.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think anybody who doesn't do that deserves half a second of anybody's consideration, because that's just wrong. But for those of us who go out of our way to do everything we possibly can to make sure that those animals that we harvest are dispatched with as little suffering as possible, and as you said, which in light of what could happen in the reality of nature is extremely preferable to, you know, being ripped apart by dogs or dingoes, or, you know, dying of old age and, you know, all that sort of stuff, disease or whatever. But, you know, when I suppose I have these conversations with people, I just would like to think that there is some level of acceptance that, you know, shown to us, that is shown to a lot of other people and a lot of other things and a lot of other areas of life in 2023, that we're supposed to. Yeah. You know, we keep getting told, you know, to be accepting of other people's choices and lifestyles or whatever. Yeah. But for some reason, certain things tend to be exempt from that preaching, you know. And you sort of think, well, come on, hang on, let's, you know, best sucker to salve here. Yeah. You know, if you're going to preach it for there's social acceptance of this, well, how come this is exempt? Yeah,
how come our group is being vilified? Yeah,
you know, and I think that those things we touched on earlier, you know, like post-pandemic and you know, more modern era approach to the understanding of the sourcing of meat and the resource that these animals are, it's gaining some more acceptance. And as I touched on in the first episode of the podcast, where one of the other guys that I listen to a fair bit, you know, he sort of said something that rang true with me, was that we don't need to necessarily convince people who are anti-hunting, but we need to have those discussions with people who are sitting on the fence. Yeah. You know, and it's not necessarily that we need more hunters. Yeah. You know. Yeah, that's right. But it's such that, you know, obviously more hunters is better because they're sort of more for our thing and what we do, and they're even better more voices to go forward and have people understand the cause of the pastime. But it's those people sitting on the fence that, like old mate in the pub, he's like, oh no, I'm not really sure about this, I don't necessarily agree with it, and it's like, hey dude, can you bring me some meat? You know, like, that's a good conversation, that's a good outcome.
And I'm very outspoken on my social media. Like, I do post a lot of my, not so much the, I suppose, quote unquote trophy photos, but I do post a lot of the animals I harvest, but I also post like my butchering process and a lot of the end meals that I make. Like, as I said, with the lasagnas and the crumb steaks and that, like, I'm very outspoken on my social media about the benefits of harvesting your own meat and kind of what you can make with it, which I suppose was an easy transition for me just because of coming up fishing. Like, I've always harvested fish for consumption, like,
which is the most ironic of all hunting, isn't it? You know, fishing is hunting and it's accepted. But,
that's right.
Mammal shooting, or, you know, vertebrate shooting isn't. It's
and like, I do practice catch and release fishing as well on species that I don't see as table fare. But like, generally in my household, like, before I started hunting, like, a large percentage of our protein intake was fish that I've caught. Like, so for me personally, kind of being half self-sufficient in far as food side of things was always something that I'd done regardless, like, with my fishing. So I think moving into the meat harvesting side of things with the deer was an easier transition. But as I said, I'm very vocal about my support of harvesting your own animals and things like that. Supply that is done humanely and things like that. And I think we touched on it just briefly about, like, people have hygiene concerns out in the field. Like, I carry cheap $2 tarps in my backpack, so if I am butchering an animal where it's long grass, it's bare dirt or whatever, I have my platform laid out, a clean platform to place my meat in. I have all my meat bags and things like that.
Yeah, nice.
And getting it back to the esky to cool down as quick as possible, things like that go a long way. So,
So going forward, Jay, where do you see yourself as a hunter in, let's go, 5 years' time? Have you got any goals? You want to travel anywhere? You want to do any of that sort of thing? You want to do a cake trip? Do you want to, like,
That's
5 years' time, what are you doing?
You hit it on the nose there, mate. So Cape trip is something, even back when I first got into it, getting a buffalo up the Cape.
Oh, for sure.
Is always been a kind of bucket list for me.
That's a lot of meat. I've got a big bag for that one. It's a big tarp,
a lot of
right?
carrying out, yeah. So doing a buffalo hunt up north is a big thing for me. It's always been a bucket list trip. But also hunting over in Alaska or Canada.
Yep.
One of those two is something, since I've gotten back into the sport, is definitely an end goal that I'd hope in the next decade I'll be able to achieve. Like, it's obviously a bit more difficult now. I've got a young family and things like that. It might have been easier to do back when I was young. I could just go overseas and do a trip for myself. So definitely something I'll have to work towards. But yeah, definitely the next 5 to 10 years I want to have achieved buffalo up north, up the Gulf, and then either hunt Alaska or Canada for moose or black bear.
Moose or black bear, nice. I was going to ask what you might want to
target. So it'll be moose or black bear, preferably both. But
Yep.
Those are the two that I'd be interested to take with a compound bow.
Yep.
And like, black bear hunting's another controversial kind of thing. You can kind of get heavily politicised. Like, I'd prefer to do a black bear hunt, not over bait, like just preferably.
Yep.
But at the same time, majority of black bears are taken over bait, which is a whole other conversation people have in regards to it's not hunting. But
so have a look on the, I think the most recent photo I shared via the Brackenware socials.
Yeah.
Rogue llama hunts is his tag.
Right. Yeah.
So he's a friend of ours who uses our gear over in Alaska.
Yeah.
And check him out. Might be a good contact to got to get in contact with and talk to him about.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Because he's he loves his black bear sausage.
Yeah. So as I said, like, I've done a lot of watching of YouTube and primarily a lot of watching of Meat Eater too.
Yes, fantastic.
So that was kind of a big thing of wanting to get back into hunting as well, is watching that. And more so, that's what convinced me to my first deer I harvested. I only took the back legs and the back straps because I wasn't sure about, because I'd heard everyone carry on about how strong it is and disgusting it is and that. So, but watching a fair bit of Meat Eater wanted me to give a go at kind of expanding my horizons culinarily wise with wild game. So, look, watching that, the topic's been brought up a lot about black bear, about how good it is.
Yes.
So it's definitely something I wouldn't mind trying.
And it's interesting too, because the same thing on the socials there, I've shared stuff from a number of people around the world that use our stuff, and in particular, I've made deliberate comment with some posts to make sure that people are aware that different approaches in different parts of the world are culturally acceptable.
Yeah.
And maybe something here that we find not culturally acceptable in our hunting practices doesn't give us the right to condemn or judge the way they do things in other places. Yeah. Again, so long as they're done humanely.
Yeah.
And that is something I think is also it's a strong educational point that comes out of the access to the YouTubes and to the Steve Ranellas and that sort of stuff. That you get to see these different approaches and the way things are done, and you go, okay, well, they hunt over bait for black bear 90% of the time, or whatever it is. It's just the way it's done.
Yeah. Right.
Listening to a podcast yesterday where they talk about hunting wild boar. I was in Europe somewhere. I can't remember off the top of my head. But using greenfield spotlights, and that's the way they do it.
Yeah.
They'll rig torches with green filters on their bows and hunt the boars that way.
Yeah.
And you go, well, okay, for a long time here, certainly back when I started, you did not bow hunt under light.
Yeah.
You did not. It was, no, it's dark. You do not use artificial light. That's an that's disadvantage to the game.
Yeah.
And you just don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's common now.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just one of those things where the culturally acceptable practice over there, it doesn't deserve to be criticised just because it's not something we
that's what I mean. Like hunting over a boat for black bear is not something I see myself wanting to do, as I said before. But at the same time, I understand that that's generally what it is. So I'm still open to. I know nothing in regards to that hunting practice. So it's not something I particularly aim to do, but I'm still happy to learn and do it that way, and kind of learn why the reasons they are that do it that way. So just because it's something a style I don't want to hunt doesn't mean that I'm going to kind of condemn it either. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Certain aspects of certain hunting that people do around the world, you go, okay, well, that's not for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to condemn them for doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need to diss what they're doing or speak down to it or cast aspersions on them and rubbish them.
Yeah.
It's just not for me.
Yeah. That's like hunting in stands and blinds. Like I've never done it. I probably won't do it. I don't think it's really big in Australia.
You ain't too old like me, your knees are cracked out. Or you fall off that roof that you can see over there and you break your leg and decide you're not walking up that hill today.
Yeah. I've kind of got the same. That's why I ended up going with the backpack, because I've had a few road bike accidents under my belt now. I'm only fairly young still, but the old body's pretty beat up. So that's why I ended up having to go with the kind of better gear to save the old back a bit. So... But, like I've never hunted out of a blind or per se anything like that. I don't see myself ever doing that. But at the same time, if that's how people choose to hunt, well, that's how they choose to hunt. So, but yeah, always open to new experiences. I just prefer the spot and stalk style of hunting. That's kind of what I've always done.
I just have trouble sitting still.
Yeah. I'm a bit the same. Like I just want to get out and get into it, kind of thing. So
I think I pull up for 5 minutes for a rest, and it's like, all right, let's go. Time to move on. You know.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the context. You know, you're hunting, you know, dams out west, and you know the goats are coming in at 4:30 in the afternoon. Yeah. You sit and wait. Yeah. You know what's going on. That's the way it's done.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we might wrap it up then, mate. What do you reckon?
Yeah,
we've been jabbering on for a while. Look, Jay, it's been a really good chat, mate. And for those listening, this is actually the first proper conversation I've had with Jay, other than Facebook chat. Yeah. So, mate, it's been good to get to know you, and been really interesting to hear some of your backstory and the bits and pieces. And we've covered a lot of ground, bows and rifles and fishing, and you know, going to Alaska and. You're going to be jealous that I'm leaving for Canada in 28 days. Not hunting while I'm there, but...
Yeah. Oh, that's even worse then. No,
hopefully through the family connections that my wife has there, we might be able to line something up in the future.
Yeah.
So that's the stealth mission that she doesn't know about. And then, as I said earlier, into Colorado, and the week before I arrive at my mate's place, he's out hunting with his elk tags. But anyway.
That'd be another dream hunt is archery elk. I've watched a lot of that online. Like, seems a bit probably a bit more demanding than I'd be capable of, but it'd definitely be a good experience for sure. But
no, it's certainly something that I've got a bucket list for, but I don't have a big bucket list, to be honest. But the more I think about it, there's a couple of things, and I think dipping my toes into the actual to the country, you know, while I'm there and having a look around, I think that'll
getting a bit of a feel for it.
At least drive the motivation to start tucking away a bit more cash.
Start actually planning towards something.
Stop buying toys and start booking trips. You know, so no, mate, it's been a pleasure having you on.
No, thanks for having me, mate. It's
thanks
been good.
for coming along, and look forward to hearing more and seeing more, and
hopefully people make sense out of my gibberish. But
it's not your gibberish, it's mine, mate. It's all good. All right. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Well, there you go, team. Episode 3 in the bank. I certainly hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I really enjoyed having a yarn with Jay, and definitely always happy to have a yarn with anyone about hunting, fishing, outdoors, which is the whole point of this show. So tune in again next time. Episode 4 coming to you near a podcast stream soon. this one, obviously. And please give us a like, give us a share. Check us out on socials, The Hunting Republic on Facebook, on Instagram, thehuntingrepublic.com.au with a website yet to be created, but we'll be there eventually. And if you enjoyed what you heard, if you enjoyed the content, please share it with your friends and get in touch if you have some feedback or if you have some topics that you'd like us to address or you'd like us to cover. We're always keen to chat to anyone about anything hunting and outdoors related. So thanks again, team, and catch you again soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Hunting Republic podcast. Catch you later.